What up?
Hello.
Howdy. How you doing?
I'm alright.
I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to hear. Um, nice. Are you streaming at all? I just needed to
No, I'm not.
know. Okay, good. I was gonna say I could turn on my camera, but I'm all good. Um, I'm streaming this. I hope that's okay with
Yeah, it's
you.
fine.
I imagine you probably don't take issue with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. I think 5 days, no, four since we last talked. And our contention mainly on that podcast was with, as I understood it, moral realism. Do morals exist? Is there a way by which we as humans can know if they exist? Yeah. Do you agree with that summary, or would you revise that anyway?
Um, the summary of the conversation, I wouldn't have taken it that way. No, I don't. I don't remember. Well, I could be completely wrong, but I don't remember us talking about moral realism at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Fuck. I could
We
whip up
can
a
do.
pot.
It's absolutely
Yeah.
allowed. But
Sorry. Yeah.
yeah.
We were talking about, I guess, epistemic truths. Is it possible to really know anything? And I thought the conversation went in the direction of like realism, scientific anti-realism, moral anti-realism. I think you're right. The overarching theme was whether or not we can even really claim to know anything. So
Yeah.
actually, I think I agree with your characterization a little bit specifically. Okay, yeah, shit. Well, fuck. I'll change the stream title a little bit because fuck. It just works easier, I think, to say that this is a meta ethics conversation, because generally that's where I see a lot of people talking about these topics. But yeah,
Ooh, that's interesting.
I feel like
I'm not the same way about that.
yeah, no, yeah, I feel like I kind of baited you now, because I feel like I don't want to talk about morals if we weren't necessarily specifically talking about those. And indeed, we weren't. I mean, I'm remembering the conversation more, and you are right. More of what our conversation was, more of our conversation hinged on whether or not we can just claim to know things. Is knowledge something that the human condition can provide through any set of different experiences or genetics or some shit like anyways, yeah, so I guess a epistemic realism conversation. Yeah, okay, shit. I'm trying to think of how we should pick this back up. So
we can start from the beginning if you'd like, because that probably makes everything a lot easier for everyone, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm of the belief, basically, that the human experience cannot provide a yes or no on the knowledge claim of whether or not we can know things, I guess. I would go as far as to say that there is no concrete way of saying that we can with absolute certainty know things. I think that we just don't have the tools necessary to make those sorts of claims.
Okay. I think you picked up on like a microcosm of the argument when we were talking last, that it's going to be a lot of semantics. I'm going to pick apart probably a lot of stuff that's going to be said. So
Sure.
I guess be prepared for that.
Absolutely.
Okay. The first statement, we don't know how to truly know, right? You probably agree with that statement, right? You said that before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we can.
Okay, I take problem with that sentence only because I don't think that means anything. That statement doesn't have any substance to it. Because you have to have knowledge to question knowledge. That's what that statement says, right?
Okay.
That's what the conversation's about.
Yep. So personally, I disagree with that. I think that we can have inferences or again, like frameworks from which we operate, where we can obtain belief systems with varying degrees of substance to them. I guess this is where, like, I think that logic can exist in a knowledge abstinent framework, which is to say that I don't think that you need to have knowledge to have logic. I don't think that you need to have
I'd agree
knowledge.
With that one, yeah. Logic is probably the only one that you wouldn't have to have knowledge about, yeah. But anything else, I think, wouldn't apply the same way.
Okay. I don't think that you have to have like absolute knowledge. I'm stipulating that little word in there, absolute, but it's important here. Because I do believe that you can have stronger systems of belief. My main contention is with the absolute claim that knowledge comes with sometimes when we use the word, which is to say that I don't think that we can have true knowledge or absolute knowledge when it comes to things like, I'll go the full 9 yards with this claim. With things like natural sciences, I don't think we can ever claim to know something 100%. I don't think that a theory that has been codified into law through rigorous testing and observation can ever be claimed to be knowledge, or I guess the same, like law to the same extent that it's generally applied, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
From my understanding, we brought it up last time, but I don't. That's not what I've typically found out to be what anti-realism epistemically is.
Okay.
Just that you can have doubts on things and still be an epistemic realist. It is possible, because obviously I'm not in doubt. It's not that you have to know absolutely everything to be a realist. That's not what that position says.
Okay.
It's just that you recognize that there are conditions that are necessary to be able to investigate things.
Conditions that are necessary to investigate things. Okay.
Yeah. Like the laws of logic.
Sure. Yeah, we could go down the logic tree of this, if you don't mind. So, insofar as how logic works, would you state that you have to be able to know things concretely, like they have to be as a matter of fact? They cannot be there cannot be something left to chance in the topic of logic to have a conversation about logic.
I think it's irrelevant whether a person would know about logic to whether it's real or not, or whether it is a necessary stipulation.
Because you think that logic exists, like what, outside of the mind or outside of the human condition, or what are you trying to get at here?
I think it's outside the bounds of what we would call knowledge. That we use that to come to conclusions about things, whether we, like it or not, I guess.
Okay, this is going to sound like I'm
go right ahead.
Not trying to reframe your argument in a disingenuous way. If you take issue with this, by all means, catch me, okay?
Okay.
I'm curious then, would you say that your position is that logic exists outside of the mind? It is mind independent? Is it mind independent? Is it something that we, say, for instance, discovered or invented?
Just to be clear, whether on the opinion of that question, I don't think that really stipulates a difference in realism. So I would probably say that it is mind independent.
Okay.
Only because it's necessary.
Okay. So I want to tackle the first disclaimer, the disclaimer that you made. You think that this is in this I guess you would call it maybe a side note or an aside. You would say that this aside has nothing or little to do, or is largely irrelevant to the overarching question of whether or not knowledge can be something that we
it has no stipulation on a person, a being, or any one person. Like, has no ontological bounding to any being.
Okay. I want to ask why you think that, but I feel as though I already know your answer, which is to say that it is like self-evidently true.
No. Okay. The way that the way that I've seen other people build positions off that, and the way I would build a position off that, is that things like ontology comes like as if it was like a pyramid, that it would come afterwards, that you would have to recognize these conditions, creating like an epistemology based on that, then have some sort of morality behind that, and then your ontology comes in. You are not like any one person isn't the focus point around that framework. That's how I would go about it, and that's what I've seen other people do.
Okay, now I feel like I'm going to like change the barrel of the gun here and say I don't know if what you or how you just described the relationship of like logic to, say, the human experience. I don't know if that's relevant to the question I asked. Do you see why I would say that, or else? Sorry. Yeah,
but that's what the relevancy of what realism is in this sense.
Okay. Fuck. I want to go back a second. I'm sorry. This seems like I'm going at a snail's pace.
I've got tons of time, so we can go through everything you'd like. So nice. I'm fine going back.
I really appreciate it. I really do appreciate that, by the way. I hope that we can maintain this level of cordiality, if that's a word, throughout the rest of the conversation.
I don't want to be aggressive.
So I don't either. So first big aside, we'll call this like carrot one, okay? What is your belief on ontology? And that's like a super broad question, I recognize. But a lot of your counter arguments to the, I guess, agnostic realist position on Thursday seemed to hinge on ontology being something that you would say comes after or is like a successor to other more fundamental truths of the human condition. Would you say that's the case, or
well, it wouldn't be. I don't think it's. I don't know if I'd consider it part of, like fundamental truths like humans or anything. It's just that from the way that I construct my system is that I recognize these necessary conditions, which builds my epistemology. I then like build from realism, which is recognizing these necessary conditions, and build off a theory of epistemology. So go through things like theory of knowledge, theory of truth, justification, belief. And then as soon as I have that, I would then start to sort of, rather than like on a ladder for that, but like right next to, or as I've heard on the other side of the same coin, it would be you'd have moral realism as well, because of its entailment into epistemic realism. That's another conversation that we can get into, but I was actually going to say the exact same thing. We can get into moral realism, but before we even go down that route, I just want to focus on realism for a second. How I'm just going through it all right now.
And that's understandable. So to understand your system, because you may say this is another one of those like independent asides, like it doesn't really have or pertain to the conversation ultimately, because maybe, again, I'm doing a lot of assumptions here, but maybe you would say that like your framework or your realism is one that stems partially from your ontology, and that it's like largely irrelevant to the discussion of whether or not we can have epistemic truths. But I see this as all encompassing. So even if you don't personally see this as relevant, can you allow me to invite you on my train here for a second of the conversation, and you can stop off or check out at any time. I just want to like try to see if I can't run down this for a second. This might get a little bit too fundamental, but I want to understand your your qualia, if you've ever heard of that term used to I want to understand like your conscious experience for a second. What do you define as truth? What do you define as things that are in your environment that exist independent of yourself, and that you can know that they will behave in a certain way every single time that you interact with them? These are like the fundamental cornerstones by which we would identify truth, I think, which is to say things like gravity or things. I'm glad you agree. Things like, I don't know, like if you stay in water too long, you will drown because your lungs are, bound to fail without the existence. These are things that like we have just like, there's virtually no controversy in these sorts of, like I'm building up the strongest steel man here, right? These are like man, if these things don't exist in reality, like if, say for instance, tomorrow the world was black at the peak of day and the water was red, like we would be sure that the apocalypse was coming, because like those are things that do not change. So like in those truth statements or truth tables, what convinces you that they are matters of fact?
Oh, okay. The truth tables example is probably a good one. I don't know if I'm go on.
I just want to say real quick, I again recognize that we are now deep into this hypothetical, and that if this doesn't, because this all probably seems really irrelevant to the conversation right now from your perspective, I want to recognize that like you are feel free to stop me or take issue with anything I just said.
This is absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. Okay. Whether something convinces me, so whether something is true, I don't know if I ever regard something as that's the wrong words. Something that is true, I don't know if I really care for if it convinces me or not, because I'm not there for like I wouldn't be believing a statement because it's rhetorically like viable or good to to pick up on, right? It would just be the matter of the fact of it being logically like possible.
Expand upon that a little bit. I'm a little lost. Everybody's lost right now. Just give us some light here. Not to say that what you just said was like out of left field. I'm sure it makes sense. I just like give me a little bit more context. Like give me a little bit more of a rope to grasp on, because I think we're close.
Yeah, okay. So the way that I would go about finding out whether something is true or not is just whether it comports with these necessary conditions. Simply put.
What are those? What are those necessary conditions?
Okay, so things like moral realism, epistemic realism, laws of logic would be probably like the right at the tip of the pyramid almost of like my framework.
Okay, then what is the tip beyond those? So beyond something like moral realism, which you believe is mostly a matter of fact, would you say, or you listed that as one of your three? I'm just going by your own words here. I'm not.
I don't know whether I would say that a necessary condition would be a matter of fact, just that it is. Well, as the like the branding says, it's just that it's a necessary condition, or Kant put it in a way that it would be something like a transcendental ideal. Because I know you've read Kant. That's what he would say in relation to this sort of topic, which is sort of a parallel to this.
It's going to seem a little bit memey. Okay, everybody's read Kant and nobody's read Kant. And I say that as like a twofold meme. Like, nobody understands whatever the fuck Kant, because Kant's a terrible writer. Like, a big aside from what Kant says, don't pin your down to like a necessary condition as defined in a very indefinite manner by Kant. What is Simon, or what is the fusion's necessary conditions for reality? I don't give a fuck about Kant. Kant was 200 years ago, and he believed that brain size determines an individual's capability of thinking. Like, Kant is fallible. I just want to know what fusion's believes is a necessary condition for understanding the universe at large.
Okay, so a necessary condition would be something that I would need to cohere to in order to make statements about any philosopher in the first place.
One more time for me.
So, a necessary condition would be something that I would need to adhere to or like conform with to be able to make statements about anything philosophical.
Okay, and so this largely, I think, relates to your understanding of logic being one of the only, if not the only, I could be wrong on that, ways of thinking or frameworks that exists independent of the mind. Whereas you have stated that maybe math, or I'm ascribing this a little bit, but like maybe things like math or maybe things like science, like most scientific methods exist as like mind dependent, or you could say human invented structures. You think that like you have claimed that logic is mind independent, right? That logic exists whether or not we have our I don't know, say in it, or like if all humans were killed tomorrow, that logic would exist. That's kind of like a shitty hypothetical, but all the same, like you believe that.
Oh yeah, okay. Sorry. So statements of like things like mind independence is they're good questions. It's just I don't actually see the use in the answer, because when we engage in philosophy, it's just we necessarily experience it. So I can't see the outcome of something being mind independent. I understand what that entails for most people. That's usually why I brand it that way. It's just that I don't see the use in saying something is mind independent afterwards. Usually because people try and get it to some objectivism or, well, realism in this conversation, I guess, which is not what I'm trying to do.
But that is what we are trying to do, right? Kind of, at the very least, kind of, right? Like the point of this conversation is just to, and it seems really slimy when I put it this way, but the point of this conversation from my angle is always to posit that there is always, and I mean always now, I mean always has been, and for the foreseeable future of, I guess, the development of society, will be a shred of doubt in some of our most fundamental and foundational beliefs, that there is always still a shred of doubt, and that if you expand that on to more vague or unexplored topics, that shred of doubt grows bigger and bigger and bigger. But that underlying all of it, even in things like water is wet, although if you saw Twitter like a year ago, there was a big meme about that. But but so fuck water is wet, but like other things like gravity exists. Like I'll drop this headset and this will drop, it'll go down every single time, no matter what, every single time, right? It'll go like Hume's argument on induction. You could go in the purple elephant in the room that is invisible, etc., etc.
I think I understand.
that I am merely trying to posit that there is no way presently and for the foreseeable future, there is no way for the human condition to provide a truth statement, like an objectively true statement that those things, be it the purple elephant in the room, or that gravity works, that there is no way for us to say objectively those will continue to work always, that those are always going to be the case objectively. Sorry.
Okay. Well, again, might seem like a cop-out, but it seems like it's not directly the same sort of answer, but whether it concerns to us and us being, well, in our mind, is like an ontology answer. It seems like the things, whether if they're going to be objective, disregarding whether humans are going to be alive, seems like that sort of answer. But it's not. Well, it would be like a it'd be post epistemology, right? To be able to comprehend whether something is objective or not, you'd have to already have a theory of epistemology to then understand what objective is.
Well, I think what you said earlier about it being post-epistemology is more true to the table, right? Like you would have to know something beyond what we usually, like how we usually use the word, or like what the word usually entails, right?
I don't know what you mean.
So what does the word knowledge to you mean? Or like what is, I guess, the definition of knowledge as we use it in these conversations? Truth, right? Like
not really. It's usually well, knowledge is a separate like sub theory in epistemology. So to try and pin down what knowledge is will be different for all of us, but that doesn't change whether realism is right or not, because realism is established before we talked about theories of like knowledge and stuff like that.
I don't know if I agree. I guess, can you convince me of that? I see realism as something that is like necessarily conditional on statements being able to be made as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Like you cannot have realism without having knowledge is I guess my position here. Like the philosophical position I'm talking about. Like you cannot, and really when I say the philosophical position, I should be a little bit like more scrupulous. Like realism is, I guess, like it's what would you call that? It's homeodox. Like it's something that I think a lot of people generally regard as like a matter of fact. It's not. It's like the default position, I guess, through the lens of most like philosophers or whatnot. Yeah. It is like it's kind of memey to even sit here and say like it posits this, because like it's what's seen as like the norm. Nonetheless, like to devise a world state in which you can make claims like this is objectively blue, this is objectively red, this object is subject to these certain laws of physics. I think to make those claims, you have to have some amount of knowledge, like some amount of matter of fact.
Position.
So, yeah, and again, my position is that those claims that we make on, well, this is a matter of fact, are always made with error, with some underlying amount of error, and that error can be evaluated. Okay? Well, wait. If you would recognize that, then
but this isn't written in relation to realism. Having doubt on things that you know about isn't. To have doubt on that, the argument that I sent in on the last stream would be a example of you having doubt on epistemology itself and why that would be incoherent.
Well, this is metaphysical anti-realism, like as defined.
But
I mean, it's the kind of anti-realism that maintains a skepticism about the physical world, that argues that nothing exists outside the mind, or that we do not have access, that we have no access to a mind-independent reality, even if it does exist. That one of those
doesn't make any statements on necessary conditions of knowledge, that's fine. Well, you could be a metaphysical anti-realist and still recognize these necessary conditions. It's not a mutually exclusive position.
I mean, so what's funny about this is I would agree, but only from the perspective of well, never mind. It's irrelevant. Like I would then ask though, like how you can. So you would argue as well that like there is no or not no. Well, yeah, you would argue that there is no true way of making a knowledge statement about the world as a matter of fact, right?
The way that a human experiences it, yes, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
But that isn't in relation to realism.
I feel like you really want to go to like the God or like the omniscient route. Is that the case or no? Am I making too bold of an assumption?
Not
okay.
Any sort of theist or anything like
that. That's totally fine. I'm not saying that I wasn't saying that because you are. I'm just saying I'm saying that more so because I'm wondering if you think that there is like an existence or a perception or like an understanding of the universe that is superior to humans or could be superior to humans that can evaluate information in a way that like would be able to make knowledge claims about it, if that makes sense.
I have no idea what that would look like. I'm unable to fathom something like that. I don't know what that would mean to think of something like that. That's why I don't believe in anything like that. That's probably why.
But you acknowledge that the human experience cannot, again, this is my central point here, is that the human experience cannot produce knowledge. You still maintain that knowledge or some recognition of a world state that is a matter of fact can exist regardless of whether or not humans can comprehend what that would look like. Yeah. I'm just wondering now what that would look like. If it's not God, if it's not an alien, what is the being, or what is the I guess the litmus test of experience.
I'm sure you've heard of the argument form of like a reductio ad absurdum, right?
Yeah.
That would be the argument that I would pose. That's what that argument form that I sent you last stream proves. That's what it goes through.
Well, okay, so that's your argument against anti-realism, right? As a position, which is to say that like I'll humor you and say that it's not literally just cogito ergo sum, basically rehashed, but taking out the mind-dependent aspects and trying to posit it in a mind-independent way. Like, it still is essentially it's essentially like saying, hey, your argument can't be true because we're even able to talk about this. The fact that we're even able to talk about these facts is in some way, these facts in air quotes, like is in some way a debunking of your position. The way that I think you'd prefer to steelman it is just that if it is the case that there are no knowledge claims, then like I guess Rem would say that you could flip a coin and have knowledge claims derived from that. I would say again that's very much a straw man. I disagree with Rem heavily on this, by the way. But
I think this is Rem's same position as well. So
yeah, I know. That's why I disagree with Rem as well, and not just you. But sorry.
The argument itself just steelsmans the anti-realist position and then makes some statements while in that framework. Namely, that if you're an anti-realist and that means there's no reasons to believe anything, why would you believe the anti-realist position?
What it does, I know this is going to sound really like shitty, but what I would say it does is actually strawmans the anti-realist position, which is to say it steelmans the general position without allowing for the sub-branches that exist within anti-realism. So one sub-branch, this is super absurd now, but because I'm not super familiar with the metaphysical anti-realist positions beyond Descartes, I haven't read enough Spinoza, Locke, or Berkeley, or Hume even to know of their positions. I guess Hume, maybe I could regurgitate like the purple elephant shit if I wanted to, but like we've kind of already done that. I'm aware of, say for instance, the meta ethics like non-cognitivist position on moral truths, which is to say that like, hey, moral truths probably don't exist, but they can still be useful through, say, for instance, a J.L. Mackie prescription of determining categorical imperatives, which is that they're always made from a faulty premise, but that they can still be useful to compel human action in a way that is useful to society.
Well, I have a problem with that because it stipulates that you accept a position contrary to what you are actually acting out to do.
Yeah, contrary, because I recognize that the position itself that I would necessarily need to hold if I were to, I guess, remain consistent in air quotes with my belief system is one that is definitely false, or at the very least, like definitely unprovable. Like I shouldn't say definitely false. I should say definitely not true. as memey as that may sound. Like I can recognize that it is definitely not true to hold this position, but that it is still useful to compel human action in a certain direction that is conducive to a useful society, say for instance. So like it is because it is useful for society, and we can measure this in many different ways, for people not to kill people. Is it necessarily wrong to kill people? Maybe not.
I'd agree with the second half of that argument. It's just that there is no basis to believing in that.
Yeah, what part would you agree with? I just want to be clear.
The usefulness of what morality can have.
Yeah.
Being able to evaluate things like that.
But then you would say that the basis is what's faulty for you, right?
Well, yeah, because I don't know why you would even start to investigate questions like that if you don't have a realist framework.
Because again, like ultimately, what is a realist framework? It is one that operates from a faulty premise, right?
Well, I would disagree. That's why we're having the conversation.
Sorry, I know, but that's my position, is that the realist framework is in fact the one that is denoting a claim, or like making a knowledge claim when we do not have knowledge on said position. And I'm gonna I'm gonna regurgitate Synth a little bit here. I know you and him, or you and them, sorry, kind of spattered this. I have no interest in ad homing you at all. I hope you know that right now. But I think Synth largely summarized this in as an accurate way as I possibly could have imagined it, which is to say that the null position here is truly, in my opinion, this is like Buddhist philosophy, like a little bit Eastern philosophy to spit at you. Like, there is no way to know anything of the universe outside of the fact that it is constantly changing. That is like the one truth statement that I may make. That if there's nothing else that can be known by humans, it is that knowledge always changes, or that things always change.
I could explain why that's a bad premise.
Okay.
Well, if I just to steal man it almost, would you say that a good summary of that would be that knowledge is unbounding, or because it always changes? The box always can always get wider.
I would agree with that. I don't like starting conversations off about my understanding of knowledge off with knowledge or what I believe knowledge, because I just don't believe that we have knowledge. But yeah, I would definitely say that things always change, or our fundamental axioms always change. Yeah.
Okay. Well, my problem with that statement is that if knowledge is always changing, is that the statement knowledge is always changing true?
So again, I believe that there are varying degrees of belief. I think that there can be more accurate or more useful understandings of the world. I'm going to stick with that word useful. I disregard that I said accurate earlier. I believe that there can be more useful frameworks towards building, say, for instance, productive society. And that is generally what I try to optimize. Do I do it for some reason that is objective or matter of the fact in the universe? Do I try to build a more whole scale or useful society for the reasons that it is objectively a good thing, either morally speaking or otherwise? No, I recognize that I cannot have an answer for those questions. However, I can recognize that there is use, we'll say tautological use, or self-evidently true uses, not self-evidently true from a knowledge perspective, but that they can, I recognize there are justifications that we can explain tautologically that may contradict one another, but are still useful in and of themselves, for building, say, for instance, things like a society where all individuals are maximized a certain level of happiness. And that's the faulty premise from which I usually operate from if I'm going to take on a moral realist position, which is to say, most of the time when I'm not talking with philosophy dude bros.
What's interesting is you already called that a faulty premise.
Yeah, because I do recognize it. So, and this, I'll say this to you. I've never actually really said this to anybody before, but when I argue meta-ethics with people that don't know too much about meta-ethics, I usually take on a faux utilitarian perspective. Usually I either operate from positive or negative utilitarianism, as talked about through usually Mills or Bentham. But if I'm talking with somebody who knows enough about meta-ethics, I say I'm a moral error theorist, because I do not believe that we can actually posit truth statements about knowledge, that we are always, at the very least, faulty in doing so. So I guess I'm more closely aligned with somebody like J.L. Mackie in that respect. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so to like bring it back to like the realist bit. As an example, let me pull it up. I've got it written down somewhere. Do you think it would be possible ever for a bachelor to be married?
Ever?
Ever.
So it's interesting. I actually brought this up as well under in the Stanford Encyclopedia because I figured we'd go down this route. This gets into some some interesting like strict propositional reductions. But like I think that there can exist a society in which we advance our understanding of a concept like, say, for instance, logic, to the point to which you can have a like a married bachelor. That our definitions of words can change and our understanding of the framework of logic can change to the point from which we can understand a society.
Well, okay, but then you're not really answering my question then, right? Because I'm not talking about that definition of bachelor.
Oh, what are you...
Well, literally that a bachelor is an unmarried man.
Unmarried
can
man?
There be a married bachelor?
You're saying, like, can we pin down words ever to mean something absolutely, I think, right?
Well, the analogy is that we work in the framework of realism to come to conclusions. As the analogy says, that a bachelor means an unmarried man. And does that mean you can have a bachelor that is married? Well, no, because it's definitionally not the case.
Okay, so somebody in chat says that they have a brother who has a bachelor's degree and he's married, so therefore he's a married bachelor. Does that count?
No, because we're not talking about bachelor degrees.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What I no, it's okay. What I am trying to, I do want to highlight something. Like, logic in and of itself necessarily is a faulty framework, right?
I would not recognize that at all. No.
It's a, as you defined it, mind-independent source of what, truth, or if not truth, it's what would you call it? I don't want to.
Well, I would call it a necessary condition. That's what my definition of it is.
A necessary condition of,
or a transcendental ideal, for example.
I again, like, how can it be that though?
Well, because of the argument posed that if you don't cohere to these conditions, then you don't have a foundation of, well, investigation. Because as you do, for example, with the moral conversations you have, is that you have to assume a realist framework when talking about morality stuff, right? I'm saying that to be able to know anything in an epistemic way, you have to assume the realist position.
Let's be clear. I don't do it for the reasons that I have to. I do it for the reasons that it is the most useful.
Oh yeah, I know about. Yeah, I'm just saying in an epistemic way that it would be. It's like a must-have to be able to talk about anything. For statements to make sense, you'd have to have that framework.
Yeah, but that things only ever make sense in a like self-derived way. That they only ever make sense in a way that derives truth from other experiences that we have not actually ironed out as a matter of fact, right? So we explain something like an unmarried man can never be a bachelor. Sorry, we can explain things like a bachelor can never be an unmarried man because those statements are self-evidently true. But there's only ever self-evidently true as we have defined them, right? That something like their own very definitions can change, and that suddenly those statements can mean totally different things. And you're saying that that there is something deeper than just the word's definition changing that we can explain. I would state that something deeper is something that we can never truly understand.
Do you think tautologies are circular?
I would say perhaps. I would want to know what you're trying to get at when you say that.
Well, the defining bachelor that way, would that be a circular definition?
That a bachelor is an unmarried man, that a bachelor is an unmarried man? Or
yeah, would that be a circular argument? Why is a bachelor an unmarried man? Well, it's defined that way. It's defined that a bachelor is an unmarried man. Would that be a circular argument to you?
I would actually go as far as to say that, yes, like self-evident truths are still truths that are made from some presupposition of logic that we have defined as inexplainable, or maybe arbitrary is a better word. It's arbitrary enough that it need no further explanation, but there still may exist an explanation beyond that arbitrariness that we should be striving to reach. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd accept that. I think tautologies are just like a matter of fact at the time, right? It's just that I wouldn't say that you would say that that's a conclusion. It just X is X. That's not like a circular argument. It's just a matter of fact.
I'm going to use a scare tactic here, but I don't mean to do it as a I'm not trying to actually scare you into this, but I just want to now pay credence to the fact that people used to say, for instance, the Catholic Church was true just as a matter of fact, that their words were in fact law just because of the fact that they stated them, not because
I understand that just saying it's this way doesn't make it this way. It's just that that's not the argument that I'm posing. I'm saying that it is this way because to think otherwise would reduce your worldview to absurdity. You wouldn't be able to make the statement that you're making about it not being real to say it's not real.
But your understanding of what absurdity is might very much be something normal in 50, 100, I have to think super long-term, 1,000 years into the future. That understanding of or your definition of absurdity may be commonplace, right? That you recognize that we all operate from frameworks that are constantly being built on, and that those frameworks for understanding the world, that our knowledge is expanding always, that we are building on pre-built concepts always, that we are scrutinizing even some of our most basic concepts always, and that those concepts are being changed. I don't want to say always, like it's happening all the time, but that they are always subject to being revised at any given moment in time, and that they are sometimes, I don't want to say often, but sometimes actually revised in these ways. That something like again, like our understanding of something like subatomic particles can firstly come into existence in sometime during the 20th century, I think, and that we can understand that understand the relationship between splitting a subatomic particle seemingly as late as into the 20th century of mankind's development in this universe, and that as we continue to develop, we will start to question even some of our most fundamental or unknown aspects of reality, that we will always continue to build upon the knowledge that we have accumulated, the quote unquote knowledge that we have accumulated constantly, but that we will never gain like a all-encompassing understanding of the world, at least for the foreseeable future, because there is always that potential that the next truth that lies around the corner could overturn the last one that we thought we established.
Right, I recognize that, and I probably even agree. I would agree with that, but the only way that you could reconsolidate the fact, the next truth around the corner, in quotes, that the only way you would be able to like cohere with that with everything else would be with a framework that I have. And by the way, I mean by absurdity, I just literally mean proof by contradiction. I don't mean like it's like, oh my god, you're an idiot or something like that. I don't mean like that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So I think we're actually in agreement here. Whereas I would agree that like we should use frameworks from Tao, as I would call them, or I don't even know how I'd reword this. Basically, like that we should use certain frameworks from which we can derive some air quotes knowledge from, or some universally accepted upon to be the best way of interpreting the world as per current definitions entail, to explore complicated topics further. But that to ever call those frameworks a matter of fact is what I take issue with.
Oh, wait, no, I'm not calling the frameworks themselves matter of facts. I'm just calling the foundations of which they rest on matter of facts. And I would argue that all frameworks work from this, as long, well, if they are consistent, then they work from that framework. There's the foundation of that framework anyway.
So I view what you just said as a tautology. The framework versus foundation distinction is one that I don't see without it, or is one that I don't see with a difference.
Well,
for you
the
to say
foundation
something,
is necessarily the bottom of it, not all of it.
So is the framework, right? That's what I mean when I say framework.
Well, the rest of the framework stands on the foundation.
Okay, again, like I see these two words as basically like definitionally the same in this conversation. Would you prefer to use a different word, maybe like a pillar, and then we could say the rest of the framework.
I'm just saying it's like the foundation. Like, okay, a bed frame's foundation is its legs, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's just that that's the thing that the whole bed stands on for it to be able to be upright.
I'll blow your mind here for a second. The actual bed frame's support beams is the Earth, is the planet Earth that it steps on.
And you would say, that's the that's a revision of it, right?
Watch what I'm gonna do again. It's actually the core.
Okay, but I don't know if you can do that with my framework.
Watch it again. I'm gonna do it again then. It's actually the sun. I'm gonna do it again. Are you ready? It's actually the universe. We can always expand our most basic foundations. That's my point. That for you to say that a bed leans on its legs for support is in and of itself a non-true or non-verifiable claim.
Okay.
Because there could always be a deeper way of understanding the way that the universe operates.
Okay, but the analogy is saying that the bed is philosopher. That's what I'm trying to say. Not the observable universe is philosopher. There could be the sun or the earth in this, but we don't. I agree that we might not know about that.
We don't know. Yeah. Wait. So,
but that's not to do with not to do with realism. We're not talking about realism when we talk about this.
That is to do with that is anti-realist. That is the anti-realist position.
No, it's not.
That is what it is. No, it is.
No, it's
not. That nothing exists outside the mind, or that we do not have access or have no access to a mind-independent reality, even if it exists. That we cannot know those statements. That is the null. Is it not?
I don't know what you mean by a null. I guess.
Let's get. Fuck. I need Rem. I need somebody that I need somebody that's unbiased. Never mind. Fuck. Not Rem. I need somebody that's unbiased that could like evaluate this. Fuck.
If we want to investigate questions in philosophy, all I'm saying is that there are necessary conditions to explore philosophy, or because of how the relation of philosophy is, everything else, like your sciences, your maths, your everything else, right? That's why this is such a big question.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I can account for these necessary conditions. I'm not saying that I can definitely know that these are real. I'm saying that I have to use these to be able to make statements about knowing these. Because I don't make statements about knowing them. I say that they're necessary. Because it'd be insane for me to say that I know about knowledge. Because the claim doesn't make... It's vacuous of substance, right?
Yeah.
That's my problem with anti-realism. That's it.
I guess I want to stress that anti-realism does not need to discard these fields of academia. They don't need to. The anti-realist position does not need to discard all of, I guess, human existence up until this point. That we don't. Have
what does anything mean without knowledge?
It's not without knowledge. It's just taking a knowledge agnostic position and stating instead that there is a.
That's a knowledge. That's a. We went through this before as well. That's a knowledge claim about knowledge. That would be a circular justification.
It's the null claim. It
doesn't matter what type of claim it is. It's a knowledge claim. You'd have to have knowledge to make a claim about knowledge in that answer.
Okay. So I want to make a comparison. I hope you don't get triggered. This is probably gonna somebody out there could get triggered about this. Do you think that like all of agnosticism is just like a big meme?
In what regard?
In the religious context.
In the religious context, no. I think it's a very valid form of a valid position. That's the position I hold.
Okay. Are you ready for the triggering? It's the same thing though. Agnosticism is just it's a knowledge claim, but in the reverse. It's just you're saying that you don't know whether or not you can know. That requires knowledge to make the statement to begin with. You're just a bitch or a pussy if you make those. And I'm sorry for the gendered insults. Not you specifically, of course. I'm saying this. Okay. I'm saying these things to really get a rise out of anybody out there that isn't agnostic, because I want to like really highlight the absurdity of what you're saying, which is to say that what you're doing right now is throwing all null hypotheses like to the wayside. That to make a claim about the universe, you have to have some objective statement to be made about it. You cannot act or operate from a framework of doubt or from a framework of like we'll say a knowledge or a truth independent framework. That you have to have some basis for that is like grounded in either truth or a mistruth. like either a truthful statement or a false statement, that you cannot have some in between or some withholding. It sounds like that's what you're saying, that like these positions in most fields, or if not all of them, are ultimately like, you know, reducible to absurdity or reducible to a knowledge claim in disguise or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. I feel I have to repreference that. Do we both agree that anti-realism is the rejection of realism?
I wouldn't even state that, because as the position of anti-realism that I'm trying to fight for right now is not necessarily stating that we can't know things, just that for the foreseeable future in time we cannot, and that as of right now we cannot.
I would, real quick, I would probably agree with that statement, but that's not an epistemic position. That's an ontological position, because it's about a being, we, in what you said, can't know about things past our human experience.
Yes. And
so I don't think we disagree in that realm, but I don't think that's not epistemic realism, what we're talking about.
Yeah. The kind of realism that you're talking about is one that exists outside of the mind, or one that exists without some form of ontology to guide you to said position. I would want you to, if for me to be a real, or for me to be convinced of the realist position, I would need some framework to operate from which could extend truths beyond my mind, or like that could extend my understanding of the universe.
But my problem with that, the problem with that statement is that if I did give you that answer, what would I use to then justify that answer and then pass that? What's about that answer?
I mean, to some extent, you're right. I would continue to press you on that. I would say, well, how can that truth be known independent of the mind?
That's the absurdity that I'm talking about.
Fuck. Do we need to go into reductio ad absurdity now? I think we probably do. Let me see if this is something that like I'm not necessarily uncomfortable with. It's a mode of argumentation that seeks to establish a contention by deriving an absurdity from its denial, thus arguing that a thesis must be accepted because its rejection would be untenable.
Yeah.
Why would it be? I'm just curious. Why would it be untenable to recognize that truth statements cannot be made now or in the foreseeable future? Why is that like absurd? Why is that something that you see as untenable?
Because if you held that belief, is that position true?
I would say that I would say that the position that there can be no knowledge statements is actually a more true, not true, but more accurate or more true understanding of the universe than one that states that we can know true statements about the universe.
How can you believe in that? How can you believe in that when you have no truth?
I know, because I subscribe mostly to Eastern philosophy, which just states that as like the only known fundamental axiom of the universe, which is that the only thing that can be known is that everything is changing, or that change is the only fundamental axiom of the universe.
Okay, well, I have problems with axioms, I guess. That's probably where we're going to have to go with this, because to have a set of axioms is, pretty arbitrary, right?
Yeah. So the roles have kind of reversed a little bit. You're going to take issue now with my prescription of the world, despite the fact that my prescription of the world is ironically one that states that the world is always changing. Although the original positions that we were both holding were me taking the position that no 100% truthful statements about the world can ever be made in 100% accuracy, whereas you were trying to say that they can, that we can know things about the world that can be, say, for instance, you weren't, I guess, necessarily saying that.
I don't think I'm making that statement.
Yeah, you wouldn't say that they couldn't be made, like that they can't be immutable, right?
No, I don't think that's, I would agree that they can't be
immutable. Or unchanging. Yeah, or that they can't. Changing, that they you would say knowledge that knowledge
isn't bound by human experience.
Yeah, you're saying it's bound by what, like or no doubt, like a comprehensive set of things that change depending on the context, right?
What do you mean by that?
Sorry, I was just trying to like rephrase what I understand your position on knowledge to be.
Yeah, can you say it again?
Well, I mean, what I was trying to say was essentially that your beliefs on knowledge is that it is something that can change, or is docile, or is not.
I have to stop you there. I don't have beliefs of knowledge. because that would be circular in justification.
Sorry, yeah. So this is why I wasn't trying to explain it, was because I feel like my rephrasing of how I understood it was like I feel like I understand it in concept, but for me to re-explain it, we'll get like sidetracked on some of on a word that I'll use, because so we have like fundamental misunderstandings of each other that we're still trying to like grip with. So as we try to rephrase each other's argument, we're battling with whether or not to use the words that the other used versus the way in which we see the world. Do you know what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I'm bound to mischaracterize your argument, not through virtue of trying to be mischievous or malicious towards your
I don't
position,
think you're being malicious. I never ascribe that.
And I appreciate, I'm not saying you are, and I appreciate that you don't think that I am. I likewise am not trying to do that with you. If I do that, of course, again, stop me and reframe it. Like I'm just going to naturally, by sheer virtue of holding a certain set of beliefs that you are challenging, I am going to stumble over which beliefs I regurgitate. But sorry, your position. This is all I'm trying to say, is that your belief of knowledge, and again, I'm going to say something that you will fundamentally disagree with, that we will not be able to get past, because the overarching thing of what I'm trying to say is more important than the description. But as I understand it, your belief on knowledge is that it can change, and you would say again, like you don't have a belief on knowledge. I understand that. I just, for the purposes of this discussion, because you and I are battling with what like we think knowledge is. To some extent, I don't even know if we actually are, to be honest, because I would agree as well that like we can operate from a framework of doubt that stipulates that knowledge can be ever changing. If we are going to recognize that we, like for instance, I wouldn't sit here and say you have a belief that gravity exists. I would say, oh, it's knowledge. Like gravity exists. Like that's just that's something that is tried, tested, observable, and you would be foolish to jump off a cliff assuming that it does not exist, or just assuming that you'll levitate or some shit like that. Like you should probably just act as though gravity exists. But when I'm having a conversation with, again, say for instance, somebody who is able to grip with anti-realism and epistemic, or like epistemic anti-realism more specifically, I would state that to make the statement of knowledge, to say that like we can observe the metaphysical world as a matter of fact and recognize that gravity exists independent of the human experience, is something that we cannot state. It can happen, it can be the case, but just that we cannot make those claims, because the human experience, I guess, say our ontology, cannot produce these statements. That knowledge it could be possible that knowledge can exist, but that right now, you and I, especially not right now, I would say in the foreseeable future, 1,000 years into the future, maybe not. I don't know what society will look like in that. Maybe we'll reach a singularity point where we either develop or we find some life form that is more intelligent than us, that can derive knowledge from some experience. But that you and I, and again, our contemporaries for the foreseeable future, cannot reach that state. That perhaps knowledge exists out there, just humans cannot interpret it in such a way that is a matter of fact.
Yeah.
You agree with that, right?
But I recognize that has no connection to whether realism is right or wrong.
But it does though. Right?
Because my argument is to say that if you want to make that statement and it means something, that you'd have to believe in. Well, you don't even have to believe that knowledge is like granted to you or anything like that. It's just that the concept is there. The concept of knowledge is there. Well, epistemology is there. And then you build off that position, like theories of belief and whatnot. And then everything else flows from that.
So I have a framework of doubt that I'm operating from that is known as, generally it's like super generally it's thought. Then more specifically, it's thought under the branch of philosophy. More specifically than even that, it is epistemology. And more specifically than that, it's, I guess in this case, metaphysical anti-realism. You would say it's metaphysical realism. I would state that though I can make some statements that are contingent on prior beliefs being held true, that those statements are not still like set in stone or locked. That like if we were to go back now to premise one, Wired, do you even believe, like if you don't even believe in whether or not we can establish fundamental truths of the universe through metaphysical observation and rationality, then what do you even think about the more general things that you believe in, like say for instance logic or science or math, in before all these things mean the same, of course, two dogmas of empiricism, but whatever, we won't get into Quine. I'm just saying that like what would you say, Wired, now if you don't even believe in these metaphysical truths of the universe, what would you say to the very like pillars by which they stand on, which is to say the general overarching school of thought regarding to math? I would say math can still very much be useful. Science can still very much be useful. These fields of study can still very much be useful because they've borne out stronger systems of belief than their opposites or their contenders. Like, I've never seen the theory of 2 + 2 = fish mean anything substantial or something or some like that has never produced a society that is like strong, if that makes sense, or useful. And again, those are arbitrary definitions. We can get more into those definitions if you want, but for the purposes of this conversation, I'll just say that the belief in math as being something that can be reduced down to absurdity of like 2 + 2 equaling fish, or the belief of physics as something that just holds that gravity doesn't exist, and if you jump off a cliff, you'll float, has not produced people that I want to follow, societies that I want to live in, utility that I want to maximize, etc. Does that make sense? That like, sorry.
It sounds like you have moral prescriptions on epistemology. As in an insanely reductive way, absolutely, but that's what it sounded like. You have these prescriptions where, well, I'd like to function in a society and things like that.
Do you think that saying? Do you think saying I want to live in a society that values these things that I don't believe we can have existential or mind independent truth on? Do you think that like stating that I want to live in those societies is necessarily like that's to make that statement comes necessarily from like morals or like some moral framework that like I have to be rooted in morals to want to live in a society?
You'd have to build you'd have to build up what oughts mean right there, right?
Yeah. Well, so, do you think an ought can derive independent of morals? Do you think I can have an ought statement like I ought live in a society? Like, do you think it has to come with morals? Like, do you think that normative statements are always necessarily morally bounded?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Because I think you can have epistemic norms. Sorry, not norms.
Yeah, that's kind of... So this gets way deep. Like, this is like, if I were to ever go back to school and, go for like a master's and even a PhD, I would write a dissertation on this. I've been meaning to codify these thoughts and like write them into a 20-page Google Docs. I have a fundamental belief of what... say most individuals, if they were given enough time to think about these thoughts, say sitting on a rock and meditating for a long enough period of time, believe, which is it's a lot of different pillars. I haven't grounded out how many there are, maybe 15, maybe fucking 50, I don't know, but there are a set number of characteristics that people generally try to maximize in their life, and that they do so for reasons that I will say for the purposes of this conversation are arbitrary, but not always morally loaded. And I would say that not even half of them are probably morally loaded. And that is what I'm trying to do here, is establish a society, a group of humans that I want to exist with that value the same things that I want to value. It is not for a moral reason. It is not for it. I would say it's probably for an ontological reason, but an ontological reason that extends beyond any sort of moral justification.
Would that be your foundation?
Yeah, those would be like the compendium of my grounded axioms, I would say. Yeah, if I'm not memeing, like I'm not memeing 100%.
Yeah.
This is like, yeah, if anybody were to use the WiredG axioms grounded meme right now, this 100% no meme implied here. That is like actually like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think just my problem with that conception of a framework would just be that if I had an axiom if I made like a new system that was formulated in the same way that you would do it, so find a set of axioms like that, what's to stop me saying that everything that Wired said is wrong as an axiom?
Yeah, so this is I don't want to pigeonhole you too hard, but Rem said a similar thing to Relevant.
I rolled it straight off.
He'll do the like, oh, so I can flip a coin and have my system be just as justified as yours. At the very beginning of this debate, we're conversating, right? At the very beginning of this conversation, I told you that I do believe in stronger accounts of belief than others. And this kind of gets me into like Gettier memes a little bit, like with just like JTB theory. I don't know if I'd say that JTB is a better account of knowledge than something like a fucking Descartes like duality or something like that. Again, you can get into like theories of knowledge and theories of like epistemological frameworks that are like descriptive accounts of observable facts of the universe, in air quotes. But I do generally believe that you can have stronger systems of belief than others. I think that like you can largely discount a certain system of belief using a more powerful or more strongly rooted system of belief that maybe, again, say for instance, derives its truth tables. I think is fair to say that derives its truth tables from like self-descriptions or tautological statements, but that those tautological statements are like more powerful than that. Not powerful sounds like gamey. I'm just trying to say that like you can have a stronger set of beliefs than others. I think that is possible.
I would. I don't know. It just seems like the way that you would. Well, how would you go about finding whether a system is more powerful than another?
Yeah, so again, I'll write a dissertation. I promise you, even if I don't go back to college, I will write this dissertation. It'll be like 20, 30 pages or some shit like that. But I think that there are like between 15 to 50 different axioms that people generally try to optimize in their lives without realizing it. I think that at least one of them, maybe this will get like a 2-page description for it specifically. One of them is a belief in what we can observe in the universe and what we can derive from that. If not able to be called knowledge, what usefulness we can derive from that all the same. And doing things like jumping off cliffs and thinking that one can fly just has never bared out like positive consequences for the human condition, even if we extend beyond this idea that like morals necessarily predicate all normative statements, right? Like, even if I said something like, hey, I don't believe that it's wrong to jump off a cliff and kill yourself, I still think that you can say you still shouldn't kill yourself or you still shouldn't jump off a cliff, generally speaking, unless you don't want to live anymore. And I believe that you can have a fairly rigid explanation of, or like a fairly rigid account of that system. I think that you can have a fairly rigid explanation for why you don't believe that, despite that not being derived from any sort of like necessarily knowledgeable claims or necessarily fact-based claims. Does that make sense?
This should be one hell of a read. I actually can't wait. I'm very curious how you'd go about doing that.
So what I feel bad about now is that I feel as though I've kind of like, I don't want to say won by any means, because again, this isn't really debate. This isn't like winning or losing.
I don't do the win-losing.
Sure.
No, none of that.
but I still do feel bad because I feel like a lot of what the conversation rests upon now is like my account for mind-dependent belief systems that are stronger than others that can be justified through internal descriptions or like I guess tautologies that I perceive as stronger than other ones. And I feel like if I don't produce that in the next 6 months or some shit like that, they'll just be like, all right, Wire was bullshitting me. All this is fucking bullshit. Like, realism is the way to go or some shit like that.
You're on my
like,
list. I'm gonna look out for you forever now.
Yeah. Okay, wait. I'm curious then. So when you're a leftist, right? Or it's okay if you're not.
Somewhat, yeah. Not
sure.
As
Do you
far
read?
As most, but yeah.
That's fair. Do you read any like theory, like Trotsky or like Posadis?
I'm not big into politic reading at the moment. I'm trying to do more philosophy stuff. I've got a lot of time off recently, and I'm trying to start from the bottom up, which is why I've been having conversations like this. But yeah.
That's good. By the way, that's good. And I would say you're probably more of a winner than if you were doing like the reading Trotsky. Like you'll win in the universe per my 15 to 50 axioms dissertation. You'll probably win a lot. You'll win a lot more reading Quine than you will reading Trotsky. You heard it here first. Don't fucking read Trotsky if you have the decision to read. Well, although again, I do maintain that most philosophers are like dog shit writers. So good luck. But I will say that like it's probably more productive a use of your time to read philosophers. But the point of me asking this question was not to flagellate over philosophy or political theory. The point of me asking this was because I wanted to understand whether or not you think that something like Trotsky's or really Posad's, is it Joseph Posad? I think it's Joseph or J. Posadas, Juan Posadis's description of communism was a more accurate or like more useful description of like communism than, say, for instance, what is espoused by like Noam Chomsky or Richard Wolff or some of the more contemporary anarcho-syndicalists of today.
I have no idea. I've never read any of that.
I see now that I now see the issue of this. So what theory do you know about beyond philosophy? Or we can even go to philosophy. Fuck it. You like Kant, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Tell me you don't. Just tell me you don't like him, because it's so much easier for us to shit on him.
Well, I've not really got a solid opinion of him yet. I've not read all of the critique yet, so I haven't got my full opinion of his framework and what he talks about.
What do you think of the categorical imperative? Do you feel like it's a pretty good way of compelling human action? Do you feel like there's a moral truth there that can be maximized through following a rule unquestionably?
Generally, yeah.
Generally, yeah?
Yeah.
So if okay, firstly, we're gonna get in now to like a subtopic of me trying to criticize you for justifying Kant's fucking proceedings on the categorical imperative. So you think that if a group of Nazis came to your door when you harbored Jews in your basement and asked if you had Jews in your basement, you would say that, like, if one of your categorical imperatives is not lying, that you should not lie to that group of Nazis and give the Jews up.
Okay. I don't know if I would agree to the same set of imperatives that he has, but I think the idea of an imperative is a good idea.
Ooh, what? This, like, okay, so an imperative, right, is an axiom, like, almost by definition, right?
Kind of, yeah. It'd be like a rule in utilitarianism, almost.
I guess you could say in some ways, like, utilitarianism is a form of deontology if the only two aspects of deontology that you care about are maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. But again, like, somebody like, I think maybe Bentham and Mills might have been caught by that, but most modern day utilitarianists, like, I guess Singer, before he came out as a hedonist, would find ways around that. If you're looking at like weak accounts of utilitarianism, maybe you could debunk them as shoddy deontologist perspectives. But I'm just wondering if, like, the understanding of your account of a categorical imperative is, or like a maxim. Do you think that there can exist maxims that you should follow unquestionably?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
I'm really going to press you on this. It's okay to say that you don't want to answer this right now, okay? Because, like, this is kind of
my position could totally change. Like, as soon as I finish reading the critique, like, it could be possible. Sure. So I'll let you know.
Right now, could you? No, that's fine. Can you give me any examples right now of a categorical imperative that you follow absolutely, unquestionably, that you would never disavow or yeah. Is there any action that you? Well, in the categorical imperative, I don't think necessarily always needs to be an action. It's just a moral obligation to some inclination or, like, belief. I don't think you always. It may be defined as a way of evaluating motivations for actions, but it's not always that. That's not always the case. But yeah, are there any categorical imperatives that you would say, like, you subscribe to right now? Like, thou shalt not. I don't want to say thou shalt not kill, because that puts like a religious spin, but that's still, thou shalt not kill is technically a categorical imperative. If it doesn't, especially doesn't derive from God, it's like so easy to just call that a categorical imperative, right? It's if somebody is telling you will not, like, don't kill people, you ought not kill people, if you are concerned with being moral, like that, I think by definition, right, is a categorical imperative. That has to be maybe I'm making the knowledge claims right now, that, like, the logic can exist as a mind independent aspect, but I think that's, like, literally what the categorical imperative is. Sorry.
Something like consent is probably one that I would think of.
Sorry,
which comes to mind. Something like consent, right? That consent. like a small version of, like, a social contract, right? Only do things whether the other person's allowed to do it.
Really?
The other person is allowing you to do it. So, for whatever reason, if someone tells me, "Hey, you can kill me," and I want to die, I would carry out that action, as long as it's consensual.
Consensual between all parties involved, would you say?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a like, I want to say that's a slightly rigid one. I want to now like spit some criticisms at it, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And then we can see how rigid it is. So what if somebody says like, you can, somebody says to somebody that they know is at risk of complicating the conversation, categorically like insane, like somebody is definitionally crazy. Would you say that like that individual, the individual in question that is handing out categorical imperatives would be justified in telling that individual that's descriptively insane that it is okay for them to kill themselves?
Oh.
Like you ought to kill
I think this
yourself.
gets into questions like next of kin stuff like that, right?
Of what?
I think if I wanted to like, because I don't know if the other party would be able to, if the insane person. Oh, that okay. I don't know if I could confirm whether that person has the agency still if they're insane. So I don't know if I could go through with that transaction.
Okay. I think that's one. Technically, that might be one way out of it. I'm trying to think if like how Kant would. I can't fucking think for Kant. Fuck this guy. I'm trying to think of how like a modern day deontologist would think about that statement. I mean, again, like Kant literally thought that black people were inferior to white people. So
yeah, I don't agree with him there.
I know that you. Let me be clear. The only reason I state that is because somebody like Kant might not think that like women or black people even have agency over their own actions to begin with. You could certainly criticize Nietzsche for the same reasons, right? Like Nietzsche was very likely a sexist as well, in the way that he viewed like the female form. So it's difficult for me to like sit here and say, oh yeah, like, you know, like Kant would say yes, or Nietzsche would say yes, and you're wrong, or some shit like that, because like they had some really fucked up belief systems in and of themselves. But that those belief systems that they held to like weren't necessarily like they weren't, you know, the most accurate or they weren't the most defensible positions of deontology. Like I recognize that there is a stronger account of deontology than the ones that the founders of the that the one that Kant derived, if that makes sense. So I'm trying to steelman the position in this respect.
Yeah.
How about never mind the consent conversation? I'm curious. Do you think that, insofar as somebody has a neo-feudalist relationship with their employee, that an employee like who say in modern day you have the working poor, and this is like super deep into the example of like I'm almost getting into politics, but the merger between politics and philosophy is like very much intertwined. Yeah. It's almost impossible, as you can imagine, to have like one without the other. Do you think that like a working poor individual who's working 60 hours a week can make a self preserving decision in good faith if they were offered up $30,000 to chop one of their testicles out of their gonads to give over to a rich person that wants to eat them for lunch?
Yeah.
Does that really? You think really?
Yeah, because they have to. I guess they have to weigh which one's more important to them, right?
Yeah, whether they want to eat or live in a way that is like not, you know, subject to starvation, or whether or not they want to preserve their second gonad. Isn't that kind of like a really shitty dichotomy to force on somebody else?
I would agree that it's shitty, but it's
yeah.
I'd take the money, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. I don't mean really as in like just the very fact alone that you're able to answer these questions. I think shows that like maybe the conversation isn't super hardcore rooted in deontology at this point. Like you're not thinking of the general question that I'm trying to posit, which is that can individuals be lumped into relationships with one another that necessarily demonstrate deontology's weakness? Which is to say, or we'll say especially your modification on deontology's weakness, which is to say that like your understanding of deontology is that as long as maxims are derived from an understanding of consent amongst all parties involved with the maxim, which is to say, like you would never say that I would say that a individual could come forth and present a maxim of kill another person because that's not consensual probably to the other party involved, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. So basically, real quick, are you a deontologist?
Well, it seems like an okay system. I don't know if I ascribe to it yet, but I'm like dib dabbing in like a few theories, but I haven't. It's not set in stone or anything yet. That's why I said things are subject to change.
Yeah, you gotta read it, and that's fair. Sorry, I shouldn't try to pin you down super hard on this.
No, it's good test for me. I like this. This is I like
maybe.
This shit.
Well, I feel bad because like knowing that you haven't read all of this leads me like I am now subject to so many ways of bias. Obviously, I'm not a deontologist, and even if I were to, as I told you prior to this conversation, well, not prior to, as I told you during this conversation, when I even do subscribe to like normative ethic theory or like normative ethics and like theory deriving from some moral truths, I still don't subscribe to deontology. I usually lately it's usually either negative utilitarianism or some variation of like positive utilitarianism that isn't like act or rule. But like, so I'm very far removed from justifying and painting deontology in a positive light. I would even go as far as to say that like oftentimes I view deontology as like a cancer or a blight because I don't know, it's like often associated with like theism. And I don't know, I'm very quick to like doubt it or shit on it. So I would two things. Basically, firstly, when I write that 20 to 30 to 50 page fucking dissertation on like we'll call it like Wired's dogma of empiricism, or some shit like that. Like when I might write my big like what the human experience should try to maximize through a system of self-justifying but like stronger accounts of belief, like I'll submit that to you. And secondly, when you get done reading Kant, if you can get done reading Kant, let me know, and I'd love to have a conversation if you're still a deontologist and debate this, because holy shit, it would be really interesting to talk to you about deontology if you're still a deontologist. I have people in my chat asking what epistemic means, so I feel like this is probably a good time to stop. We're so far deep now, like into sorry.
It's a really hard question, actually.
What does epistemic mean?
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
It's the way that I would summarize that question is probably like different to everyone else's as well.
Yeah,
it doesn't really help.
I think I don't know if you watch Destiny that often, but Destiny like recently had a conversation with Rem about moral realism. That. Yeah,
that's what got me on this sort of train. Actually, is that sort of that conversation. Rem did one with Ask Yourself like 6 or 9 months ago or something like that, and it was pretty pivotal for me.
Yeah, I actually have been meaning to go back and watch that because I'm more as fucked as this may sound for people like maybe you, but also individuals that aren't a huge fan of vegan, like the vegan YouTube scene, like Vegan Gains and Ask Yourself. I might like, at the risk of alienating myself too much, I'm probably more closely aligned with individuals like Ask Yourself and Vegan Gains. But Ask Yourself especially in terms of their moral prescriptions of the universe. He's a moral anti-realist. I'm a moral error theorist, but generally speaking, like I've been thinking about this for a while. Like if I ever did get in a conversation with Ask Yourself, I'm sure I would agree like on 90% of the things that he said. I think, anyways. I'm not.
Well, he's an epistemic realist now.
Is he?
Yeah, after a conversation with Rem, which is what threw me the other way as well. Was that one conversation that Rem had with him? I'm basically regurgitating his argument in a less shouty way, I guess.
Is that which conversation?
Rem's channel? I think the video is literally called "Establishing Epistemic Realism" with Ask Yourself. It's like an hour and a half, I think. I think I've watched it twice. Once when I didn't really understand what it meant, and then when I was more read up on it, I found it.
The great Ask Yourself debate, establishing epistemic realism. I want to say two things. Firstly, in the very most recent conversation that Destiny had with Ask Yourself, in the very recent conversation that Destiny had with Rem, like the one from 3 days ago, 4 days ago, or whatever. Yeah. Ask Yourself actually said in the comment section that he was being heavily misrepresented in this conversation that you were referencing that they had. So
wait, in the conversation between Rem and Destiny, or the one with Ask Yourself and Rem?
So I'm referencing like 3 different conversations all at once. So I recognize that it's hard. I recognize that this is difficult to understand. I did not watch this conversation that you told me about, the great Ask Yourself debate, establishing epistemic realism, the one that came out in April of this year. Well, in a few days, it'll be next year. But yeah, or last year. But I have not watched this conversation. I do want to watch this conversation. I might even do it on stream. We'll see. If I don't get if I cannot get taken down, I'd be very much interested in watching this on stream. But despite that, in the most recent conversation that Destiny and Ask Yourself had, the one that came out 4 days ago on moral realism and philosopher writers. Yeah, Rem. Did I say Ask Yourself?
Yeah, I know you.
Okay, shit. Yeah. Rem and Destiny had a conversation. It was pretty much a debate over more realism. They touched on a lot of the conversations that you and I talked about today, as well as the conversation that Rem had with Ask Yourself from 9 months ago, or this conversation that we're talking about right now. They talked about this conversation, and Ask Yourself was in the comment section of that video and said that he was being heavily misrepresented by Rem in.
Yeah, I just found the comment on the video.
Yeah, just in the comments. So two things. One, I'm subscribed to Ask Yourself. I'd be interested to see if Ask Yourself reaches out to Rem and has another conversation with him about this topic. And then two is, again, I really want to watch this video to see what's going on here, because yeah, I'm just really fucking curious. I've never seen it. I'd be really interested to see how Rem and Ask Yourself hold their positions. I know Ask Yourself's really into propositional logic. I think I think he's pretty big into theory, and like he can follow conversations pretty well. So I'd be interested to see if Ask Yourself is truly, as you put it, swayed by Rem's position of epistemic realism. So
he is on epistemic realism. They haven't had, even though they said they were going to have it soon after that conversation like 9 months ago. They said he hasn't been convinced on like the moral realism stuff yet. They haven't talked since. I don't think.
I figured that's the case, but I want to watch this just to make sure, because again, Ask Yourself even said that he was taken out of context in the comment section. So I'd be interested to see if like Rem is saying throughout the debate, "Oh, I'm convincing you of this. I'm convincing you of this." Because Rem, I don't love Rem. I don't really know Rem, but I like Rem's content. But I've noticed in conversations that he has with people, he does kind of pigeonhole and lead the conversation a bit. Like I could give you specific examples, but I'll just say generally speaking. And I can sense maybe you're a fan of Rem, so I don't say this to shit on him, but I'm just saying that, like, as I've noticed from Rem, he has a tendency to do what I just said, which is kind of, I'd almost call it railroading the conversation, where he'll say that he established something that the other individual agreed on, and he was doing this a lot with Destiny in their most recent conversation. That Destiny himself will say, Destiny himself will say, well, Synth, I know. Obviously, Synth's a bit biased here, but Synth even says Rem thinks he convinces everyone. And yeah, he does really try to lead you to dead ends. When in actuality, there's like a deeper conversation to be had there that I think even Rem knows about, but doesn't want to explore for the purposes of seeming like he's more correct in a position than his interlocutor.
He basically wants to look good to the audience. I understand that. Yeah. Because he wants the position to look good to everyone else rather than just the person he's engaging with. That's what it seems like to me anyway.
Probably. I mean, I would never say that that's like concretely the 100% reason why he's doing it. Yeah, there might be another there might be like pride or like 100 other confounding factors. I just know that he was doing this a bit with Irrelevant as well.
I haven't seen the Irrelevant stuff properly yet. I've only seen Leon's stream on last week, like a couple of days ago. That's the only thing I've seen. I completely forgot that they left off on bad terms the last time I saw about it, or the last time I saw them talk, because I was actually involved slightly in their conversation and really kind of rage quit a little bit. Yeah, and I guess that is a good point that one of their more recent conversations was on the Mind Ciphers debate, or the Mind Ciphers podcast, where I guess they were both present. So I don't know. Again, I've said this before. I've said this, I think, at least twice now to you. But like, I'm not trying to stand for a relevance philosophy. I'm not standing for Rems. So
yeah.
We're on the same page.
Yeah, and I would even go as far as to say that I think Rem probably has a more accurate account of philosophy, like in theory and in application, than somebody like Irrelevant does. But just that when Rem provides that account, he's doing it like as though it's a matter of fact. Like he's doing it as though I am Rem, the arbiter or the purveyor of philosophical truths. There is no truth beyond my philosophy, and you start and stop with me. Once I come through your stream, you have towed the line of philosophy to its natural conclusion, and we have stopped where I have decided to stop. And it's like, come on, Rem, like that's not fair, you know? Like there's shit that's deeper than you, is all I'm trying to say. And it feels like he does that a lot with conversations. And I would happily tell that to him to his face as well. This isn't just shit, just in case anybody's clipping this shit and trying to send it to him. I definitely will tell him these things if he'd ever talk to me, but you know, yeah. Anyways.
It seems like I think I know his response to that as well. Is that it's a problem that I have with Rem, is that he'll probably say, "Well, it's not just me that thinks of this in philosophy.
Yeah.
It's like these wide range of people that also believe that." I'm like, that's really an argument.
That's not even the case though, because there's I don't know. In some
he
ways,
sifted through the literature. That's what he'll say next after that.
No, but he hasn't though. Again, like I know he's again. I would even like criticize some of his more fundamental critiques of philosophers. Like he describes more moral error theory as a realist position, he calls it a technically moral realist position that posits that all moral claims are made from a faulty premise. That's not even technically
I don't think
true.
I've heard him say that. I think I think I remember him saying the complete opposite, because he has a moral realism like argument that he uses that specifically goes against that.
Now I want to continue this conversation. So one second, I'm gonna find it. So you know his website, right? Rem's website.
Yeah, remthebathboy.com.
Yeah, Rem the Bathboy website, moral realism. I want to find his particular post. The problem with moral and epistemic anti-realism. Here we go. And then he talks about error theory for a very brief second. He says there are really only two types of moral anti-realism. Firstly, that's not even true. There are more forms of moral anti-realism than just error theory and non-cognitivism. But let's just see what he has to say on error theory. Strictly speaking, actually, error theory should not be considered a form of anti-realism, since there is a truth value always assigned to moral statements. However, they always happen to be false. This is not like what Mackey said at all. He said this. I don't know. He like links it up to like expressive. Here's the page, by the way, because you said you haven't heard me say this.
Yeah, I think I got that page.
He links it to Ayer and emotivism or expressivism, but like that's not what Mackey was trying to get at. Let me be clear. I don't claim I've never met Mackey. Is he even? I should actually know if he's still alive. I think he isn't, but I could be wrong. Yeah, he died like 40 years ago. He's some dude from Australia. He died before I was even born. I've never met Mackey. I don't claim to know 100% what Mackey was talking about when he talked about Inventing Right and Wrong, the ethics book that he talked about moral error theory in 1977. But I can be pretty sure that Mackey would never say, "Oh yeah, moral error theory. That's actually a cognitivist theory." Again, like I don't even know if necessarily like Rem says that there are. It seems to be the case that Rem doesn't really know what error theory is. That's really all I'm trying to say here.
I would agree with that sort of characterization. If he says, from reading this now, I feel like I've heard him say differently. I'd have to go sift through clips, but just this page on its own.
Just to be clear, this is his website. Just to be clear,
I'm saying just based on this page alone, I would disagree with this page. Like that paragraph about types of moral anti-realism, I would disagree with it. I would agree with you on that fact. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And when I say I appreciate that, that's very hollow. I don't mean to say that like I want to bully Rem now in front of you because I know that you're a fan. Like I like.
I'm
Rem,
not a Rem
right?
stan. Like I'm not here to defend him. I'm here to just defend, what I've seen to be believe. I guess I don't know.
Yeah. Look, this is one of the first things you learn when you get into philosophy is you can't stand anybody because everybody's wrong in their own ways, right?
Everyone's some ways wrong, yeah.
Yeah. But hey, I do like Rem, and I actually like philosophy, and this is where like I hope that you, myself, and Synth can continue the podcast because I really want more philosophy representation on Twitch. I think there's a huge gap of it. Yeah, and I want more people talking about these things because this is the way forward, despite what Stephen Hawking's or other natural scientists would say. I think philosophy is 100% the way forward in all things, politics, science. I said that really weird, but still. So I do appreciate what we do. I appreciate this conversation.
Me too.
And thanks, dude. Nice. Sweet. Okay. Well, I'm gonna actually watch this debate because I'm really curious to see how Rem dunks on Ask Yourself. This will be you've given me content, and I owe you for that. The world.
The life of a Twitch streamer.
The life of a Twitch streamer. Yeah.
All right.
So yeah. Thank you very much. Okay.
No problem, dude. Anytime.
Yeah. Sweet. Okay. I'll catch you later. Okay.
All right.
Nice. Peace out.
Peace.